Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to my Victober TBR. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I'm going to be attempting to read in the upcoming Victorian October. So before I get started on the very long list of books I'm going to try and get through in the month of October, if you haven't heard of Victorian October, I will link down below my announcement video. Victober is a month-long reading event slash readathon, which is hosted by me, by Anne from Beyond the Pages, Kate Howe, and also Lucy the Reader. The basic idea is to encourage people to read Victorian literature in the month of October. I will link down below my announcement video and also the announcement videos of the hosts, which include 5 reading challenges for you to get your teeth into as well. But today I'm here to tell you about the books that I'm going to be trying to read in the month of October. So my Victober TBR is rather ambitious. I have 15 books on this list, and the chance of me being able to read 15 Victorian novels in a month when usually I get through about 12 books and half of them being Victorian is probably really quite ambitious, and I don't think I'm going to manage it. But despite the fact that I will probably not get through all of these books in the month, what I'm going to be telling you about today is some of the books that I may be picking up during the month. Some of them are higher priority than others, and some of them are just things that I would like to get to in the near future that I will try and pick up in October, and if I don't manage I will pick up a little bit later on in the year or early in next year. But let's get on with the 15 books that I have to tell you about today. First, I'll go through the books that I'm reading for the Victober challenges. My challenge was to read a book by a Victorian, Scottish, Welsh or Irish author, so I have quite a few that I'm hoping to get to for this, but one of my key priorities in October will be to read Miss Marchbanks by Margaret Oliphant. This is one of the books in Margaret Oliphant's Carlingford Chronicles, and these books are a series of interconnected novels that take place in the same town. They do have some overlapping characters, but they don't need to be read chronologically. As of filming this, I have read 2 of the Carlingford Chronicles. By the time this goes up, I hopefully will have read 4, and then I will be reading Miss Marchbanks, my 5th, in the month of October. And in fact, Kate Howe and I are going to be doing a read-along of this because we both love Margaret Oliphant a lot and we think she is seriously underrated. She was Queen Victoria's favourite novelist, but she has been rather forgotten by the establishment, despite the fact that I think her novels are brilliant. They're also really easy to read, so I recommend her as quite a good author to start with if you don't read very much Victorian literature. Although she has still really interesting themes and complicated characters, her prose style is not dense and it's really easy to get through, and I really enjoy her work. I will link down below the Goodreads group for the read-along of this that Kate and I are hosting, and please do go and check that out down below. I think I forgot to mention that Margaret Oliphant is Scottish. Margaret Oliphant is Scottish. And then an Irish Victorian novel that is down on my list is George Moore's Drama in Muslin. Another one I mentioned in my announcement video, but I'm so excited to read this. I have a feeling this will probably be one of the first books I pick up in the month of October. It's about a mother trying to marry off her daughters in the Victorian period in Dublin, but apparently it was also banned from circulating libraries because of its lesbian content, so I am curious. As I mentioned in my announcement video, I'm really hoping to do a video this month on LGBTQ themes in Victorian literature, so I'm hoping to get Drama and Muslin read fairly early on in the month so I can include that in that video. This one's fairly high up in my priority, I would say, and I'm really looking forward to it. And then a Welsh Victorian novel that I'm looking forward to reading in the month of October is The Rebecca Rioter by Amy Dilwyn. A physical copy for a change. There will not be very many physical copies in this video or in most of Victober. I will be doing most of my reading on Kindle. I even made myself a Victober folder on my Kindle so I can put all the things that I'm going to read in Victober on there. I read a lot of Victorian literature on Kindle, partly because it's free and partly also because it makes it much easier to track down copies of some books that are otherwise hard to find. But this one, The Rebecca Rioter, I could not find a Kindle edition of, and this doesn't happen very much, which says a little bit about how underrated it is. But I did find a physical copy, which is nice, and it's also not that long, so I think this will be one that I do manage to get to in October because in comparison to some of the other books on the list, this is rather a short one. I did mention this in my announcement video, but this is set in Wales in the 1830s and deals with what happens when some men dress up as women in order to protest against road tolls. I'm really looking forward to reading this. It's not an author I know much about, and hopefully I will enjoy it. Another Welsh Victorian novel I might get to in the month of October is Cometh Up as a Flower by Rhoda Broughton. She's a Welsh Victorian author I'm quite interested in, as she is another one that sold very well in the Victorian period but has been really forgotten since. Her novels are quite sensationalist, so I'm expecting something fun and fast-paced and possibly a bit scandalous for the Victorian period. This is fairly low down on my priority list. Unless I have a really productive reading month, I'm probably not going to get to this one, but hopefully I will still read it at some point in the future, and it's on my TBR out of hopefulness. So those are the books that I'm hoping to read for my challenge. I got a bit carried away, as you can see, because in doing the research to give recommendations in the announcement video for my challenge, I stumbled across a lot of authors I hadn't heard of before and I got very excited. But anyway. Kate Howe's challenge challenge is to read a Victorian book with something supernatural in it. So I have two things down for this. One is Uncle Silas by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I am not 100% certain whether this is definitely supernatural or whether it's just gothic and has hints at the supernatural. I'm not sure. But I read J. Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla last year in Victober and really enjoyed it. Carmilla is a vampire novel and it's just so much better than Dracula in my opinion, and I really enjoyed it. I found it really interesting. It also had a very sort of sexually, romantically charged relationship between two young women, which I found really interesting for the mid-Victorian period, so I'm really looking forward to reading something else by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. And then the other book I have down for the supernatural challenge is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I have read this before many times. This is probably my most read book ever. I think I have read this at least 10 times. I studied it at school and then at university, so I've read it an awful lot of times, and it's also one of my favourite books. It's probably in my top 5 favourite books ever. And I haven't read it for 3.5 years, which is probably my longest gap since the first time I read it, so I'm really excited to reread this. I'm partly rereading this because I think it fits in nicely with the supernatural challenge, especially because what I really like about Wuthering Heights is that there are some supernatural elements in it, but they're all things that you can explain rationally and you don't have to view them as supernatural, but you can, and I really enjoy that. I'm also rereading it as part of my Not So Hypothetical Victorian Literature course series, as I'm going to be talking about representations of rural landscapes in Wuthering Heights and Far From the Madding Crowd in November, so I'll probably reread Far From the Madding Crowd in November. And I also wanted to pick it up this month because Jenny King is hosting a read-along of it, and I will link down below her channel and her announcement for her Gothic read-along that's going on in the month of October. If you are going to be picking up Wuthering Heights this month for Victober, I would definitely recommend joining the Goodreads group and the discussion for that as well. And Angie's challenge is to read a underrated Victorian book, and as a guideline we've said like under 12,000 ratings on Goodreads. A lot of the books on my TBR for Victober have under 12,000 ratings on Goodreads. A lot of them have like under 100. But the one I have specifically picked out for this challenge that I am really excited to read and is definitely one of my priorities this month is Michael Armstrong, Factory Boy by Frances Trollope. This book has 11 ratings on Goodreads, so suffice to say it is definitely an underrated one, but I'm so excited to read something by Frances Trollope because she's the mother of Anthony Trollope, and Anthony Trollope is one of my favourite Victorian novelists. He's one of my favourite novelists, full stop. I love his work so much. I really enjoy his work, and I love that his mother was a novelist too. I think it's great that his mum also wrote novels, and I like that she might have encouraged him to write books and that they could have like chatted about their writing. I have like a nice image in my head of that, and I'm really excited to read something by her. Michael Armstrong, Factory Boy is an industrial novel. I know little else about it, but it's written by Anthony Trollope's mother and it's about industrialization and factories, and I think I'm gonna love it. I'm very excited about that one. Lucy's challenge is to read a Victorian book that has been recommended to you, and for this I have picked out The Odd Women by George Gissing, which has been recommended to me by multiple angles, most notably by my mum, for the love of classics, also spoke about it recently and it sounded really interesting. I love George Gissing a lot. So far I have read The Netherworld and New Grub Street by him and adored both of them, and I'm so excited to read more by him. The Odd Women sounds really interesting, and I hear it is in a way Gissing's sort of like feminist manifesto, so I'm very curious about that one. Another one that is high up on my list. I'm not going to get through all the ones that are high up on my list because like the majority here are like things I want to read immediately. This is a problem. Anyway. And then the general challenge from all 5 of us is to read a Victorian book by a female author. I don't have any problem with that. Out of the 15 books that are down on my TBR, 8 of them are by female authors, so I will definitely be fulfilling that challenge, and I haven't picked out anything specific for that one. But I do have 7 other books that I'm hoping to get to in the month of October, so let me go through them for you as well. One of them is The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot, which I think it is finally about time that I read. I'm going to be buddy reading this with Kate, Lucy and Ange, and also with Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and I am both like really looking forward to reading The Mill on the Floss and also really hesitant. As I think I've mentioned before, The Mill on the Floss is like pretty much the only book I have ever DNF'd. I realised that my Kindle has remembered where I got to like 3 or 4 years ago. I got up to chapter 6, so I didn't get very far, and I just wasn't feeling it. I'm not the greatest fan of George Eliot. We have like a very mixed relationship where I really admire her writing and her work, and I admire what she's doing, and I like her stories and her themes and her characters, but I just don't love her books. They just don't like fill me with the warmth that so much other Victorian literature does. But I have been enjoying her more recently. I did quite like Adam Bede, though I have mixed feelings about it, and I'm currently rereading Middlemarch and loving it a great deal more than I did when I was 14 and first read it. And there are a few things that have pushed me towards reading The Mill on the Floss. One is just that I have been enjoying George Eliot a bit more lately. Another is that it is one of the only books I've ever DNF'd. Another is the fact that it supposedly was really influenced by Elizabeth Gaskell's novella The Moorland Cottage, which I loved, so I'm really curious to compare them. And also, I realised that The Mill on the Floss is probably the most well-known Victorian novel that I haven't read, and therefore I feel like it's a book I ought to have read. So we'll see how I enjoy it. Perhaps I will enjoy it more than I think I will. Part of the problem is that I've seen a film adaptation and I didn't like the plot, and that's like biased me against the book, which is unfair. So I'm sorry, George Eliot. Hopefully I will read that this month. Having 4 other people to read it with will hopefully encourage me. And then there is The Last Chronicle of Barsetshire, which I will be buddy reading with Caroline from BBC Girl 520. We have been buddy reading our way through the rest of the Chronicles of Barsetshire, and I love them so much, and I'm so certain that I will adore this book. They're a series of interconnected novels all set in the same town, and they are wonderful. The Small House at Allington, the 5th book, is one of my favourite novels ever now. I adored it so much, and the series as a whole is so wonderful. So I'm so excited to read The Last Chronicle, to see how Anthony Trollope draws everything together in his wonderful, beautiful way. I just think no matter what happens in that book, I'm just gonna like cry a lot. Then I have 3 books that I know very little about, but whose authors I know I really enjoy. The first is No Name by Wilkie Collins. I've been meaning to read something else by Wilkie Collins for a really long time. I read The Moonstone and The Woman in White as a teenager and really enjoyed them. I can't say I remember them incredibly well now, but I know that I really enjoyed Wilkie Collins' writing style. I know that I found his characters and his writing style really engaging, and I'd really like to pick up something else by him. I believe that my mum really enjoyed No Name, and I know that we had a copy of No Name on the shelves in my house when I was growing up, and that's basically like the only reason I have for picking this one above any other Wilkie Collins novel. I'm excited to read it nonetheless because I like Wilkie Collins, and really it's about time. I should have read something else by him before this point because I do really enjoy his writing style, and I'm really looking forward to getting back into it now. And then another author I have not read since I was a teenager. This month I would like to pick up Clara Vaughan by R.D. Blackmore. R.D. Blackmore is the author of Lorna Doone, which is a wonderful historical Victorian novel which deals with feuding families and forbidden love and like all of the good stuff, and it's great and I loved it. I haven't read it since I was maybe 15 or 16, but I remember I adored Lorna Doone as a teenager, and then I just have like ignored that author for like 8 or 9 years since. So I'm really looking forward to reading something else by him. And then another author I adore is Geraldine Dewsbury. I read her book The Half Sisters last year for Victober, and it blew my mind in so many ways. It was absolutely incredible. It is a wonderful book about 2 sisters with the same father but different mothers, completely different lives, and about the lives they lead, and about like gender and class and respectability and fantastic things. I loved it so much that I'm desperate to pick up something else by Geraldine Dewsbury. She's quite a forgotten and underrated author, but I managed to find a Kindle edition of her novel Zoe. Again, I know nothing about this, but I love her as a writer, so I'm curious to pick up anything by her, and hopefully Zoe will be enjoyable. Finally, I have 2 non-fiction Victorian books. Both of these were on my TBR for Victober last year, and I didn't read either of them, so hopefully I will read them this month. Hopefully. The first is The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell. I am really excited to read this, and I don't know why I haven't read this before now. It is a biography of Charlotte Bronte, one of my favourite authors, written by Elizabeth Gaskell, another of my favourite Victorian authors. I can't see how I won't love this, and I'm really fascinated and curious about it. One, to find out more about Charlotte Bronte's life, but also to find out more about her and Gaskell's friendship. I'm going to buddy read this with Ange and Lucy, which should hopefully push me to actually read it this year, because I don't know why I haven't read it yet. I'm sure I will really love it. Elizabeth Gaskell about Charlotte Bronte, I don't know where we could go wrong. And then the final book on my TBR for Victober, which as I said was on my TBR last year, is The Uncommercial Traveller by Charles Dickens, which is a non-fiction book by Charles Dickens. I have to confess that I'm really struggling to pick up anything new by Dickens. I had finished reading all of his novels by the time I was 18, and I've been rereading them all ever since. But because one of the joys of Dickens for me is that I know his work, and when I read one of his novels it's like comforting and warm and lovely because I know everything that's going to happen and I'm really familiar with them, and that's one of the joys of reading Dickens. And it means that I feel really apprehensive when I pick up something new by him. Although I've read all his novels, there's a lot of other content by him out there that I could read. There's a massive wealth of short stories and non-fiction by him that I haven't read. This was on my TBR last year and I should have read it by now. And it's Dickens, so hopefully I will pick this up this month. I have hopes for myself. We will see how it goes. If I don't pick it up this month, I will be ashamed of myself. Those are the 15 books that I'm hoping to read in the month of October. I'm not going to get through all of them, let's be honest. This is a ridiculously ambitious TBR, but hopefully I will get through a fair number of them. I will be happy with 10. 10 will be good. Because I am very unlikely to actually be able to read all of these, please let me know down in the comments if there are any that you especially recommend. I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into some brilliant Victorian literature in the month of October. I'm very excited. Please let me know if you are joining in with Victober, and if you have a TBR video, please link it to me down in the comments below. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be back very soon with another video, and you know know, next week is Gaskell week, and then it's Victober, and like, yeah, lots of Victorians. I'm happy. I'm happy. Anyway.